Hello and welcome back to JLXP episode 38, week 3 recap. One of the craziest experiences of a week. I think maybe looking back, we'll say like, oh yeah, this is just another thing. But as it was happening, one of the weirdest rides. Also, I got Raz on the show for the very first time. Thank you for joining me after a long LCS week. We record these Sunday night after LCS so that I can release them Monday morning. But how are you feeling, man?
Feeling, crazy. So much has happened, all kind of unexpected. I'm much more used to just like being well prepared for changes and these things where it's like, oh no, like literally the fans jaw dropped during some of the things we will talk about, obviously, like in the moment in which it was happening. So, a wild week that I'm sure I'll look back on.
And that's the first thing I want to talk about. And we don't necessarily have a whole bunch of new information, but I think it's still interesting to talk about the experience of the week, because I would say when TSM was 0-4 and they benched Shen Yi for Yursan, and we had all this stuff coming out. Like we had this leaked phone conversation that happened on the TSM subreddit.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like a content machine for people who hated TSM about how everything was just on fire. And honestly, things are still not going well, but that story was just so dominant. And then you're on the desk, I'm at home watching, and it's like the last game of the day comes up and Cloud9 tweets that LS is just gone.
Yeah.
And everyone, like, I thought it was a joke for like a split second, but the desk was really serious about it. And then, 10, 15 minutes later, LS tweets that he found out 4 hours before the show. And then they lose to CLG, who was 0-4. And they'd made content that they had released like 3 days ago where LS is on camera saying something must have gone super wrong if we were to go 0-4. And just like, if we don't go 2-0 against TSM and CLG. And just that actually ended up dwarfing the TSM story. And then today, we were watching this TSM C9 game where for about 15 minutes, it looked like TSM was just going to go 2-0 and Cloud9 was just going to go 0-2. And you and me were talking about what is this timeline that we're living in? How ridiculous is this? And then obviously they clutch up and end up ending the week at 1-1. But talk to me a little bit about more of like your emotions during that moment than necessarily like pure analysis.
During the moment in which the firing or like the release happened,
Well,
or
kind
like
of just the journey of the weekend. So
Yes.
we can do the like when you heard about the firing, and then I think after that
I think
talk about the TSM C9 game.
Yeah, I can talk about the weekend in the sense where it's like I would never have expected it. I remember being on Hotline League and saying that, hey, if there were to be a team blowing up, then it could, like, I would say the highest chances of a team in the LCS would be like C9 and TSM, just because of the language barriers. And I can get maybe like half a mark about it, but not really, because it didn't feel like any of this happened because of the language barriers, like specifically C9.
Yeah.
And so when you get the news, and for us on broadcast, we got the news about an hour before from producers who got word from management saying that a release will happen.
Not here. Yeah.
Yeah, like we got like a release will happen. It will happen before the game. Just kind of have a look out for it. And I was like, okay, this changes everything. Our entire plan on the desk for this matchup, because we were already still on the high of C9 is doing insanely well, doing it with like different picks, and they're all on board with like the focus and strategies that LS has had for the team. And I wanted to, like, for myself, wanted to move away a little bit from LS because we've done so much of a focus on the coaching staff, and of course they just have such great players. Yeah. And then that big news happens. You're like, oh, so I was like, oh, okay. Well, that's on the back burner, right? So for me, it was probably one of the more uncomfortable things, and you'll probably can share that experience because there's so much that you just don't want to say, because you've been in experiences in the past where the team experience is where like you're just not going to like, I just think we'll never hear the full story, and I've accepted that. We'll maybe hear crumbs here and there, just a little bit, and it's always kind of a little bit of what the in between. Like the truth is in between, and you can understand it when it comes out. But when you hear that, it's like, wow. So I really have, like, I have a feeling. Like, the feeling is that, wow, this is really early. Like, it
Yeah.
must have been something insane because you would at least want to finish the week, have that conversation, and find alignment with either the coaching staff of the LS or the team as a
Mm.
whole. Because, like, if you already made such a big gambit and bringing in LS, bringing in his coaching staffs like Revan, who he's had previous experience with, Malice on his academy team, like you
Hmm.
built the team around him. I would imagine that you would try a little harder to make it work, right? And that
Hmm.
unless if something crazy has happened. So I know how the fans felt because everyone's up, riled
It was
up,
just a
and for
shock.
me,
It was a
it's a
massive
shock.
shock.
And so I was like, there's no way in my mind that they can make a decision as crazy as this, especially with how much weight they put behind LS at the very beginning
Hmm.
in week 2. Because I guess coming
Yeah.
into week 3.
Yeah.
So I really want to know more, and I don't want to like have that knee jerk reaction because you just don't want to be putting in undue harm to people who probably made like an understandable decision. Um, so
Hmm.
that was just like the first day.
Yeah,
and then
exactly, exactly. And
and
I
then the
agree with
second,
I
yeah,
agree with the
go.
stuff that you said in the first day too. And there's almost kind of that added level of discomfort for me actually,
Mhm.
because the speculation is way more harmful than it ever is helpful. But that's kind of
Yes.
the only thing you can do at the time.
Mhm.
And internally, when a team is facing a huge amount of public backlash, it's just so difficult for the people involved because they just don't want to deal with it. And it's
Yeah.
something that Fudge talked about briefly in his interview with Travis, that Travis actually posted Sunday night. And I'll have a really small snippet of that at the end of this conversation from you and me. But he was like, "Oh, actually, I'm more frustrated with the distraction and our preparation coming into this week." And I'm like, that actually makes sense because all these players are not here. Like, they could be friends with LS or not, but they're not here for the Church of LS. Like, they're here to win League of Legends games. And when
Yeah.
something distracts them from winning League of Legends games, that's actually going to be the thing that's frustrating to them. But it almost to me reached a totally different level during that TSM versus Cloud9 game where Tactical is coming off of his 70% damage game, which is
Yeah.
more damage. It's a higher damage percentage than any LCS player has had in any LCS game. So that's across 10 years. And Tactical had like just done it in his first game with his new support, where they basically had like 4 supports for him because Huni was on Lulu, the Udyr built Knight's Vow and Mikhail's, the
True.
Orianna was a mid laner, so still a mage, but in part able to enchant. And then they have Tactical on the hyper carry Jinx. He pops off there, and then he's like full Uzi mode against Cloud9 because he's
Yes.
4-0-0 with like a turret taken at 9 minutes. And you're thinking this game is a wash, but
It's over.
it's not. And we walk away and they're 1-5 and Cloud9 is 4-2 and things actually feel kind of normal. But what was the
Yeah.
ride like there for you?
It was wild. That
Yeah.
game itself, because it like at a certain point when they blew up bot lane and it was an 8-0 game at like 8 minutes, I was like, there's no way Cloud9 comes back into this game because they're as much damage as they have as a team, they are incredibly squishy. So if they
Mm-hmm.
poke their head into any fog of war or TSM side of the jungle, they'll just get destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, wow, like TSM is playing perfectly. So like, and then the kind of Baron throws, I suppose, happen.
Yeah.
I not so much Baron itself, but the turn was
True.
like not it was not the best. And so that gets C9 back in the game. It happens again with Baron steal, and at that point, like C9's comp is online. So it's rough seeing it from that perspective. I remember I think 2016, when I was with coaching Dignitas, and like we were going up against the top of the table team in IMT, and we were having a perfect game. It literally felt like unlosable.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like talking to the Renegades coach, and I was just like, "This is it!" Like, so I was running on stage because you kind of have to do it when we're
Oh
cracking
no.
inhibitors, and then we like into that inhib. I was like, "Okay, well that sucks. But like we still have a huge control." And then we into Bear, and it's like, whoa, wait a minute. And then it just like they just take over after that certain point. So I was like, that gave me a little bit of flashback on that, but that stuff happens, and I know TSM will feel a little frustrated by that, but a huge sigh of relief for what is an insanely stressful week for Cloud9 and their fans.
I think the 0-2 would have just been, weirdly enough, like a catalyst for something. And I almost feel like a bigger catalyst for TSM if they'd been able to close it out. And I want to say that it shouldn't be this way, but that's kind of the way that it is. Even if you have 20 plus scrims in a week to possibly give you a good idea of how things are or aren't turning, and even if the stage game is 90% one way and 10% another, in almost everyone's memory, the win and the loss is what matters.
Yeah.
So the result actually shouldn't change that much, but to me, it like really, really does. And I hope that kind of makes sense and doesn't seem like too much of a cop-out, but that's just my experience over time. There was almost like the explosion of this week would have been so much bigger had like TSM played the Elder situation better against Cloud9 and we're 2-0. We would be having like an actually completely different conversation, even though that little moment is not that big a deal in itself. So, really interesting. I want to wrap up the TSM thing before we try and wrap up the C9 thing.
Okay.
Development rosters. They're 1-5. They have pivoted. I think I expect them to continue to play Yurson next week based on what they've done. But I personally want to see them. I mean, I guess do we go on a new patch next week?
I'm sure that we do.
Yeah, I think we do.
We would have a full week on this patch.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So I think there's more significant changes to the Spell Thief's top. So I need to see them play more than like a one threat comp over and over again.
Yeah.
That's too much. Like Tactical has been playing well for sure, but if they want a chance to make playoffs, which is getting grimmer and grimmer, Huni and Kaiduo actually have to step up a little bit, and it can't just be all Tactical. What do you think?
I think so too. I don't think it's too bleak because I do still think that Huni is a strong laner. Like the only issue is just going to be how much pressure they put topside, because the new direction for TSM is a positive, right? Playing towards bot lane is something that they should do with how well Tactical is playing. Kaido does need to step up, but I do think that they're playing basically through top lane, or there are times where Shenyi was roaming mid. And they're trying to support Kaido a little bit more. And I think they can just land on playing towards bot lane. It will change. Like, it'll be different with the new strategy and just playing standard. But at least that, they can just go back to laning a little bit more, play off of what Huni has done in the past of being a strong laner, and just he can play weak side and just, opt into that. So I hope they don't jumble it up a little bit. So it'll be hard, but play towards Tactical and they'll find success. I actually am quite concerned, because if you make your support change this early into the split, I don't really think, especially with how poorly they're doing right now, that they'll ever find a comfortable window to bring Shenyi back. That in week 6 or something, if you do that, you're still trying to like scrounge for wins to either find yourself in playoffs or make it a comfortable spot for Tactical, because he already said, like, when the changes happen, he's like, okay, I already am now playing with 2 supports, both of them that are English second language, right?
Yeah.
So it's already difficult for him. So if you're just swapping between 2 supports throughout the split, I think that's something they will not want. So I actually think because they swapped Shenyi so early, they really don't give them much of a chance to going to make that decision, at least by this split's end.
And it's an incredibly short split. I think people forget that. Like, it's not an NBA or an NFL season. NFL season goes across 5 months, basically.
Yeah.
NBA seasons go across 82 games, which is usually also like 5 months. Like, what it was, like 6 months probably at this point for an NBA regular season. We're at 8 weeks. We're at a 2-month season. So you really don't have any time to make adjustments in terms of what TSM has. A very tall order for them. But I do want to try something. I have a little bit of audio from Travis's interview that he shared with me and gave me permission to share on this show. So I am, through the wonders of technology, going to play it here. 2 snippets. So I'm going to start that right now.
I already sort of knew it was going to happen like before when it happened.
Okay.
So I had already I already knew what was going to happen, so it wasn't like too bad for me.
Yeah.
Obviously, like, once all the reasons come out for why it happened, blah blah blah, people will know like why it happened. But for me, it was like whilst it was happening, I sort of knew that there was problems. Then once it finally happened, I was like, yeah, I sort of expected it to happen.
Okay.
So it was like it wasn't too bad of a shock to me.
You were not playing in a state of shock yesterday.
Yes,
You're not like, oh,
Yeah, so there he's talking about how he like knew that it was going to happen before it happened, so he wasn't in a state of shock, which is a little bit different than what a lot of the speculation was yesterday. And then something to maybe make it so we don't have to speculate that much. Towards the end of the interview, I'll just pull up the timestamp right now. At 8:42, he shares this.
Anything you want to say to folks out there?
Soon you will get clarity on the situation, and we're still going to be a very good team. That's it.
All right. Well, thank you.
So yeah, it says soon you'll get clarity on the situation, which is actually way more than I thought we were going to hear out of a player interview, especially when we had Le Tigris do the post-game interview with Blabber and even say, like, I know you've all been told, not to talk about it. So either Fudge didn't get told that, or he went against possibly C9 guidelines, but it sounds like Cloud9 is going to be clarifying their stance in some way. And what has actually been, even though people are like asking for transparency, what has actually been fairly professional and courteous up until this point is just parted ways. We thank him, and LS saying, yes, he was surprised by it, but he thanks, Cloud9, and he thinks all the players and staff are super talented. So I don't know if we're going to get actually a whole bunch of spice out of this, but I just think it's, in terms of speculation, like I'm just going to wait to see what Fudge has almost promised in an interview.
Yes, which I think is for sure dangerous, like for him to say this,
Really
because
dangerous.
from the management side, especially with how quickly this is, I'm not sure. I'm sure they're still making a decision on like whether or not they're going to make a video on it, like whether or not they're actually going to discuss it and how much they're actually going to say, if anything at all. Because like I think I said this on broadcast, like the one instance in which my org said something about a release of a player, I didn't like it. Like I would have rather just taken the blame, or the org take the blame on it and just say, okay, especially if a player doesn't have much power in a situation, just like, let them have their opportunity, because they'll definitely find another team or another situation. So I think most of the time, like 80% of the time, it is more valuable for the org to just say nothing. so if they are, I think this is definitely special situation, and if they are willing to say something on it, then I am all ears. So for him to make that somewhat of a promise, he must either know something that is going to be said, he's been told that, or just expecting it to happen, that's the dangerous part. And the other part, like knowing it, right, like never, especially in a major organization, will a decision from just management alone will be made as like, okay, we're releasing him, especially if it's like you do want to have an understanding from the players, if not just some of the players, if it's like a serious subject. So that's where all the mystery is coming in, and hopefully something comes out. I just want niblets, just a little bit.
You want little niblets?
A little niblet, right, of just information, so I can be like, okay, this makes sense, or they're overreacting.
I mean, you got a pretty big nibble out of the Fudge interview right there. He revealed so much unknown information. He thought Leandre's was the best purchase on Corky yesterday. He was not silently protesting the LS departure. He knew about it. He thought it was best for both parties. Like there was a lot in there. I think everyone should go check that out over on Travis Gafford's YouTube channel, because it's a pretty good 9-minute watch. Once you're completely done with the JLXP video, like make sure you watch all the way to the end and then go over to Travis. But
there we go.
Okay, I think it is more will be revealed in the future, and I'm sure we'll talk about it then. I don't want to further speculate on the Cloud9 TSM drama. Let's talk about the other 8 teams in the league, Raz. So you and me on the desk at the end of the day.
Yep.
FlyQuest. There was this, Dash was ribbing me all day about this, because both FlyQuest came into the week at 3-1, and they had a tough schedule. They play against Dignitas and they play against 100 Thieves. And right before the 100 Thieves game, everyone's talking to FlyQuest because it's like this shocking, surprising, no one expected them to be at the top of the standings, 4-1 team. Let's give them their roses. And I say like, nah, I think 100 Thieves will win. Everyone thought 100 Thieves would win, but I was also the only one to say it before that. So then, like, I
was waiting for the prediction too. I was waiting for the full prediction because it would have been full red.
Yeah. But FlyQuest clutches up in that game. Kumo made this ridiculous Tryndamere play when they're 5k down. Solo kills Abadage's Corki. They get Baron off of it. The game is still close. They win another like clutch team fight at the end where I feel like 100 Thieves overforces by trying to like package over top of a Veigar, which just don't do as a late game Corki because Veigar will use 2 buttons on you and he's going to pop your GA, which is exactly what happened. And FlyQuest like wins the fight. But then at the end of the day, I actually haven't talked to you about this, like how you feel about this, because you're like, yeah, FlyQuest, they're 5-1, they're one of the best teams in the LCS. And I'm like, hold on, if they're one of the best teams in the LCS, how are they going to finish? And we ended at 12-6 as the break point, which
yes, we did.
Which would be 7-5 from now.
Yes. So 5 more losses basically would be the spot.
Yeah, and so we haven't figured it out. It's going to be something spicy. I don't even think it's going to fit at the end of the LCS broadcast because it's like such an insignificant bet between 2 analyst desk casters, but we're going to do it. Like whether it's on Twitter or whether it's on this podcast, like one of us is eating something insanely spicy and just seeing what happens from there. Do you feel good, since it was super in the moment and you were super pressured to put a number on, about this 12-6 FlyQuest bet for the end of the split?
At the moment, like at that time, no. Like at that time, I was just like, hell, because like I was in the same boat of like, sure, they're at first place, but I think Team Liquid, 100 Thieves, Cloud9, I would say that they're stronger. Evil Genius is not doing well at all right now, but I would say that they're stronger. But the reality of like FlyQuest having a stronger start, and also I felt like I was underselling them a lot of the times, not I undervaluing them, because I was like, at the beginning of the split, I thought Kumo would be one of the worst top laners, performing top laners. I thought top lane was a pretty competitive role, and I thought that he at the end of the last split was not very good. I thought Tukui would be an interesting one. I thought he would be a good mid laner, but I thought he would just be middle of the pack.
Sure.
And the same could be said about just like jungle and bot lane. Jungle, especially since it was a really competitive split, and I found it really difficult to put Jose Diodo among any of the strong top 6-7 junglers, especially when River was performing.
Yeah, and especially after last year, where he had a pretty underwhelming LCS debut after being super hyped LLA jungler.
Yes. And so what started to change my mind and actually start backing this team was because, it's the same element of what Aphromoo is a part of on Dignitas, of being a greater sum of their parts. They're moving really consistently towards their objective. There's really never them faltering on like a play. I feel like they ultimately make strong decisions around it.
They do.
And I think what sold me 100% on them being a good team is the performance of individual players like Tukui. I think Tukui has come in and actually just had a dominant first part of the split up until this point. I've always felt like the mid lane pool in the LCS was weaker, and that like Bjergsen, I would imagine to be at the top. And then at that point during lock-in, I was like, okay, and Jojo Pion. I thought those two would just be our top mid laners. And we're seeing people like players like Abadaga, who I thought would be a strong performer as well, underperforming at the beginning of the split. And really it's creating a pathway for Tukui to just be one of our stronger, like top 3 mid laners. I don't know if that will end like that, but it's certainly how it's starting. So when I got home, I started looking at the matchups. I started looking at the standings. I was like, okay, so I was thinking, okay, 5 losses where I'm hitting the limit. And I looked at the teams and I was like, okay, there's about 6 games that I'm afraid of. And naturally in any regular season, you will have you'll be able to beat one of the top teams. I'm sure they'll beat Evil Geniuses or Cloud9 as the split goes on. So I was like, wait, this is actually a realistic bet, especially if I'm comparing this to last year in Spring Split for Dignitas. They performed much better than everyone expected. And I think FlyQuest is having a much better start. So it's realistic.
Okay.
It's just going to be really, it's going to go down to the
It's
wire.
going to be tight. Yeah, because Dignitas, with their spectacular start in spring of 2021, was 11-7. So
Yeah.
that's real close. I almost hate being the like Debbie Downer on things like this, but then I think FlyQuest is actually handling this incredibly well for what it's worth.
Yes.
On social media, they're just like kind of celebrating and doing like, you know, nice art with like good flexes and just having a good time. What I don't like is when teams try and take like a victory lap because they're good and 5-1. And FlyQuest is not doing that. I think it might have been like Dignitas who did this last year, where they were getting really uppity about how like they don't spend any money and they have no imports and how like it's all right but like, come on, man, it's been like 3 weeks. That's from like an org standpoint. From a gameplay standpoint, I do think that all the things you said are true, and I think to me, Takui and Aframu have been the two biggest performers. I really want to give Aframu a shout out at 29 years old, being a top tier support in the league and being reunited with Johnson and really picking up kind of exactly where he left off. With that being said, even with their 5-1, you take the game today, it was clutch, but there's like 3 things that happen in that game where if they go slightly differently, FlyQuest loses.
Yeah.
You take their game that they had against Golden Guardians in week 1 when they were like 6K down and then won some really clutch team fights to win there. And they smashed TSM. They got beat pretty solidly by TL. Mm-hmm. And then their other win was obviously against Dignitas, which was a good quality win. So, not too many things need to change in their 3-3, which is still basically what they are performing at. So if I'm just going to say they continue performing at that rate, and let's say almost a sports analogy for this would be in football, they have a 100% win rate in games decided by 3 points or less, right? They're not blowing people out. They're just winning the close games, which doesn't make them a bad team, but it does set them up for more variability down the road. And I think that's why I'm confident that you're going to be eating something really spicy in 5 weeks.
Look, the reliability is not there, but one thing that I really found confidence in was, first of all, they're a team that hopped on the Janus Smite stuff, or just like Karma Smite, whatever. Just the Smite support top laners really quickly, and then pivoted away from it in playing normal stuff, so I didn't define them, and that they could still work on playing standard. And then I think the Kumo interview, where he said that it would basically, when he was talked about like just the success that they've had so far, he immediately talked about the lock-in, the fact that they sucked in lock-in, like the first half of it, right? Mm-hmm. And then said that it was difficult for him to answer, but he was proud at the start of their split, and he was proud of where they are at. So he's very conscious of like not taking that victory lap, like you're saying, and knowing that there's still a lot to clean up. So their mentality, I think his mentality is great, really, but it's a really strong mentality for the team to have, and it makes it so like you have confidence in their continued growth. And if a new meta were to come along, that they will be able to hit like that, because one thing that Kumo is really good at, I mean, I know that he spams Champions Q and all these things, but he's just somebody that he'll full send it on picks, on new picks in solo queue. Like there are times when I'm watching his games, there's like, oh, Yone just came out, he's instantly playing Yone top, and he's dying a lot because he just he's just hard like limit tests on certain picks. So like there's a new pick that's coming out, this team will play it. So that's reliable, and so I feel good about it. I wasn't confident on the desk, which is why I plead the fifth immediately and then got cornered. But like, I think I'm pretty confident right now.
Okay, 12-6 is a good number, man. That's a lot of wins. The actual total flip side of FlyQuest of how did they perform in lock-in versus how do they look now has got to be EG. They were at a certain point. They were. Oh, geez, I actually have this number even wrong. They were 9-0 in lock-in because they 4-0'd the group stage, they 2-0'd the quarterfinals, they 3-0'd the semifinals. So they were 10 wins in a row, right? That's got to be right. But then since then, they were 0-3 in the finals to TL and 2-4 to start the split. Yeah. So, like, what to you is missing from the 10 straight wins to now the winning 2 of their last 7, but what ultimately matters, the 2-4 spring split start.
I think they're making a lot of mistakes as the game comes down to a wire, right? Like it comes down to like clutch team fights. A good example is literally today where I felt like they were in a really good position when they killed Graves, and then of course the game paused.
That was a whole experience.
So
Man.
that was an entire
Yeah.
experience, and that's gonna be a point where, for sure, both Power of Evil and Vulcan were going back and forth on Twitter, and it didn't
Yeah.
seem like it was a anger-fueled argument. It was just a good discourse between the both of them about where a dead game is, or dead state of the game is, and I felt like that was a really good moment for EG to run away with that win. And even before that game, I actually excused a lot of what was happening in the split to just strength of schedule. Like, they lost to C9, which makes sense. They lost to 100 Thieves that looked really good and took down Team Liquid. And then they lost to Team Liquid, and I was like, okay, those are the top teams in the league.
Right.
And they're only going to get better with their younger talent. And then they lose to IMT. So that makes it look worse. I've always been the person that said that it will look like as for this team at the very beginning of the split because of how the strength of schedule is, and then it'll miraculously turn around when they go up against Golden Guardians, CLG. I want to say FlyQuest, but not after the bet that I just made.
Yeah.
They will turn around more wins. It's just not looking good right now because when it gets down to the wire, they're not a clean team. So it's tough to see that. And I think they'll only get better, but it's rough right now.
Yeah, I do think if Corki can reduce his priority in the meta, that will end up helping them. Like, something that was so exciting about JoJo was how active he could be on the map and how well he was moving with Inspired and creating plays. He actually won one of his Corki games, but he's played it 3 times now in their 6 games, and his total kills, deaths, and assists is 4, 4, and 4. Like, he just hasn't been interacting with League of Legends that much when he's playing Corki, and I think that hurts the type of very explosive gameplay they showed in Lock-In on top of what you just said. And I'm also really, really honing in on this week 4 for them, where they play 3 games against opponents that on paper, 3 weeks ago, they should have smashed. I said the 3 weeks ago because their very first match is against FlyQuest, so that's going to be like a big circled one. That's the final game on Friday. But yeah, then they play Golden Guardians and CLG. So from a mental standpoint, I know they have some veterans on the team. I actually consider Inspired a veteran, even though he's only 20. Inspired, Vulcan, and Impact. But then for JoJo and Danny, like, there's definitely a mode you can get into when you lose a certain amount of games in a row where you just start thinking you're bad, and you almost sometimes you need something external to pull you out of that, or you can just be completely loaded with internal confidence and everything is going to wash off of you. I think that's actually going to be tested a little bit for EG in week 4, where they were top of the world. Now, so many people are calling them overrated, overhyped, all this stuff. They could very realistically have a 3-0 week, and JoJo or Danny is going to be like player of the week, and we're going to be talking about them again, and they'll end the first half of the split with a winning record. So nothing has been set in stone for them yet, and I hope that's what they're saying to themselves, because while I do not think they were as good as their lock-in performance, I also do not think they are as bad as their LCS performance thus far. So I think they're somewhere in the middle, and I hope they prove that next week.
Yeah, I think they're around the 3rd and 4th place range, around with C9, and that Team Liquid and 100 Thieves are just like right now top 2. The thing with EG is that I agree with you. It literally reminds me of the discourse around Jizuke last year, that I think Jojo Pion, when he's on more explosive picks, like you said, like a Silas, his Rise, I really enjoyed his Rise gameplay. I thought his Rise is really solid because he's constantly looking for plays to support his bot lane. And that's something that I think really works for this team. So when he's playing control with mages, like you said, and he's just kind of locked in his lane, and and he's definitely a risk taker, which is not what you want to do if you're playing front to back and more poke mages like that. Then it bites you. So the meta turning a little bit is going to definitely help them, and also just more time for him to play, because he's literally I was watching streams where he's just practicing Corki Mid. He's just literally slamming it so he can get more comfortable on the pick. So that's going to do him a lot of good. which I'm sure that's what EG's entire purpose was, to just have him and recognize it's going to be rough for the first few weeks. So yeah, I'm on board with you, which makes this a little boring. I want to fight a little bit, but but yeah, I think they will pick more wins up. It's just gonna be a little rough at the very beginning because of how the schedule turned out.
All right, fight me with TL then. I said this on the desk, but I want to go into a little bit more detail.
Okay.
I think TL is going to be 16-2 by the end of the year, which would be the best record they've ever had in the regular split. It would be like, I believe, the best LCS record anyone would have had since like 2016. Like 16-2 is really hard to achieve, but
Yeah.
I'm just, it's just a feeling I have, and it'll depend on a couple factors. But right now, I think TL has basically had hard mode for the first like 2 months of the year. Core JJ couldn't get his green card. Tons of risk of whether or not he was going to even be able to like play on the team. He's here now, only played 2 games. So they've been playing with Ayla, who I think did amazingly throughout the split, but it's still a different player they're dealing with. Bjergsen mentioned that he had COVID during lock-in. This is a team that has been operating mostly remote for most of their practice, which is, while doable, greatly inferior to playing in person, which I think they've just barely been able to do. And with all of that, they've also had one of the harder schedules through 6 games. Their only remaining opponents are Golden Guardians, Dignitas, and TSM. So teams. They've already played all the other teams at the top of the standings and are still sitting at 5-1. They handed FlyQuest the only loss FlyQuest had, right? They beat Cloud9 for one of their 2 losses. And also the way they play right now feels very, very controlled. Like, in terms of like the type of team they're going to be, like Bjergsen is a player who I think when he's succeeded has played a very controlled game. Core JJ is also someone who, while aggressive, is also in a controlled style of aggression. And they have that one wild card in top lane who they seem very okay allowing to be the wild card in Bwipo. And that can continue to work well. And the final thing would be, I don't think any of the other teams have it together. So on a day, it's very unlikely that the teams are going to beat them as long as TL continue this reliable. I mean, I just feel like their drafts are so reliable. We're always seeing strong enough front to back team fighting. They're never putting themselves in a situation where they have like no winning lanes. They always have something to play through. It is very conservative, but very effective. So unless they like go 14-1 and then just start doing crazy experimentation because they're just locked in first, I'm feeling right now that they could just run over the LCS. Fight me on this.
I love that. I love that you have a strong stance on this one because, I do disagree. So, like, there we go. Because even Gyotto himself has mentioned how the league itself is extremely competitive with the teams. So, like, once again, I talked about 100 Thieves. I literally think 100 Thieves is, I think they're second best, I guess. But between both of them, they will lose more games. They've already lost one, and I think that they will continue to lose more games. And that's just because they have a different style as well. Sure, both teams find success through bot lane, but closer will always be a carry jungler that they can rely on and pour resources into. So that's just something that's going to be really difficult for a team like to handle. So that's one team. Cloud9 is a team that, even though they got, right now, press for them is really rough, and that this week was really tough for them. Almost losing 0-2 to
the bottom of the standings.
To the worst, to the bottom of the standings teams. But Berserker is way too good of a player. Summit, I think, is having up and down performances, but he's just, once again, another top talent that coming into the split, I thought he was just going to be the best top laner in this league, and he still has the opportunity to do that. So I would say C9 would take wins against them. I think that past that, I would go towards teams that will make games competitive versus them. We already saw FlyQuest falter, but I would say FlyQuest can for sure take a game off of them. Dignitas can do the same because they do have strength and confidence around playing around River. And then here's the strongest argument that I could provide.
Okay.
The strongest argument I could provide, although I agree that they do play a controlled style, there is an element of experimentation that they go for, and that's Bwipo. Bwipo as a player is a risk taker, and he will if he sees a concept of a pick that he likes, he will pick it. And and they will just pool a lot of resources towards bot lane for the most part. And so if he's picking something that he's confident around, but one thing doesn't go right because of the volatility around the pick, volatility on the side of the map that you're not playing towards is just gonna give you losses, especially in a best of one regular season. So they'll just find losses for that. He'll take chances that will, maybe blow up the game in the opposite direction. And so I think he is right now the best top laner in the league, but he is also someone that, at least for the regular season, is more than willing to like take chances that may not work, and he's completely confident doing that. So I think that's one thing that has been different for Team Liquid that Team Liquid has never had, in my mind, is a top laner that is super experimental. And although he's currently in a system that is more controlled, is going to try stuff, throw it on the board, and that will make their games volatile. So, and I didn't even mention Evil Geniuses because they're so down. but Evil Geniuses for sure.
Because they're just overrated. Really, they don't have a chance of beating Team Liquid. That's what you're going to say, right? Yeah.
No, I just didn't see them because they were so low in the standings. But no, EG should for sure take wins off them. Like, people forget the fact that they do have one of the best junglers in the league in Inspired, and Impact, who's one of the best top laners as well. I think Impact right now is the second best top laner. So there are just way too many teams that should beat them, that I think that they won't get close to the TSM and IMT record of 2016.
Okay. Yeah, the IMT was... So what we're talking about is IMT and TSM were both 17-1. IMT did it in best of 1, TSM did it in best of 3s. But those are both, if we're thinking about match record versus regular record, that's the record to go for. I don't think TL is going to run the table. I'm giving them the one loss. I think you make good arguments, and it's more about like debating whether or not to say this. I'm going to do it anyway. I think last year, almost every team in the LCS like boomed in some way. Like they had some type of pretty big internal drama, which then negatively impacted the way they play on stage. I think TL, just from what I know about the players that they have together, I think there's just a really low chance that happens. Like, I think they have a really good chemistry within that team right now, coaching staff, players, and the synergy that I think they're going to be able to build. That can help carry them through the volatility that other teams are almost inevitably going to have, just because League is really hard to not have that type of stuff with how grindy everything is and how much social media contributes to that type of pain. So that's like a little X factor that I'm just like, man, it really feels like this TL team is clicking. And I know every team like externally shows that they're clicking through their content, but like you hear whispers and you can kind of tell like what the boom can be for any of the teams. And
you know, it was funny as you were saying that, I just went through the standings of last split, and I was like, oh, there was drama on that team. Oh, that roster changes. Literally like more than half the league. So
100 Thieves definitely boomed the least, and look what happened. Like they won the whole split. Congratulations, they did it. Okay, I do one other thing. You're free to participate, but I'm just kind of spinning this on you right away. I've done a way too early MVP ranking, like after every week. So it's like, okay, after 6 games now, who would your league MVPs be? I'll tell you what last week my standings were. Last week I had Bwipo as the MVP. Yes. I had Berserker in second rank. River was 3, and FBI was 4.
Okay.
So this week, even though Bwipo didn't have an insane week, Berserker, River, and FBI also didn't, so no one is supplanting Bwipo for me as the front runner for way too early MVP. I actually have Takoi jumping up. I had to put a FlyQuest member in. They're 5-1. Previously, there's like the storyline of Aphromoo, but I just know, especially winning Player of the Week and the overall performance that he had this week, he would be the one that I think would get the nod. And then below that, I have Berserker and then still FBI. And River's the one who fell off because Dignitas definitely faltered this week. Do you want to participate? Do you have any changes?
I like this a lot. And you know what for non-NBA lovers, this is gonna be like go right over your head. But
Yeah.
FlyQuest feels like the Cleveland Cavaliers.
Ooh!
Where you're like in the All-Star game, it's like, well, you have to have
Yeah.
one person that's in there because like it can't just be a team thing. You have to at least have a player that you
Yeah.
can focus on. So yeah, I agree with that one. So for me, I would say closer. Is right now I'd put him as the way too early MVP because even in their losses he's having insane performances. Like his Viego gameplay was great, his J4 game was insane. I feel like he's doing really well in team fights. He's not the reason why they're losing, though. Of course, comms is always gonna, you never know on that one. But by the end of the split, they will be a team that will be top of the table, and so he has just been the most consistent player. It felt like throughout the split so far. Even today's game, I would say he was doing pretty damn well on the Trundle. So
Yeah.
not much he could do on the champion, but he's doing well there. And then I would say second would be I would put Hansama and FBI is like competing for me as AD carries who are in another competitive role, both
Yeah.
at the top of their game. Berserk had a rough one with the Karthus game.
was just abysmal. But
That was the awful
That's
one.
like the one blip. It's like, okay, you threw 4 interceptions this week. Like, just don't let it happen again.
Exactly. So those are the 3 names that come to mind right now. And if I were to give a FlyQuest member as the Cleveland Cavaliers,
Yeah.
I would say Takuya as well. I think Takuya has been an extremely consistent player.
That'll do it for League. But thank you for coming on the podcast. I missed the All-Star game.
Same.
Steph Curry.
I'm sad.
Steph Curry hit 16 threes.
Whoa! It's ridiculous.
Yeah. Team LeBron won yet again, 163 to 160. So really close, actually. But
Yeah.
16 for 27 from 3. 50 points.
He's just
What the hell?
he's just one of the greats. He's actually just one of the greats. Everybody knows it. And he needs another championship at this point.
He's been slumping this year, actually. He's been getting like hard carried by the Golden State Warriors defense.
That is true.
Yeah.
I didn't get to watch too many of their games, but I saw some of the highlights. So
Who's your pick for the NBA Finals this year, right now?
right now, NBA Finals, I think the trade was pretty damn big for the Brooklyn Nets.
Right.
So I actually feel like even though they have been doing poorly and were doing poorly, I think if they have Ben Simmons playing and even if it's just KD, I think they're probably going to the finals. Chicago is a team that right now people are giving a lot of praise for, but I think playoff basketball is way too different of a game, and defense matters so much.
It is, dude. If COVID restrictions change for the playoffs and they randomly just have Durant, Simmons, Kyrie,
Oh my God.
it's going to be the
It's just
biggest.
over.
You'd think. I mean, the Sixers are good, right? Like
Yeah.
that would be an insane series if you actually got Simmons versus Embiid in the playoffs. That would be
Yeah.
that would be one that I might actually favor Philadelphia in just because of the like pressure that would
Yeah.
be on Simmons.
So I think the finals would probably be Brooklyn and the Suns, and I
Yeah.
think the Suns would probably win. I think the Suns are just the best team, and
Mm-hmm.
I think they will get better with playoff basketball like we saw last year. I mean, injury concerns the only thing that we'll ever worry about, and I hope that we don't have that same situation with CP3. But
Yeah, true,
I think
true.
they're way too good of a team.
They're crushing people. Their defense is so good. Like no one pays attention to them because I guess the Phoenix Suns just aren't interesting to talk about, but like 48
Yeah.
and 10 at the All-Star break is cracked. Like it's so good.
It's absurd.
Yeah.
It's absurd. So I think they're just too good, and I think Ayton just leveled up as a player too. So I don't think we'll ever see an issue with like if he was going to go up against an Antetokounmpo. I think they'll handle it better defensively.
Yeah. Thanks for the quick NBA talk. I used to do this with Keen at the end of episodes. I apologize for the people that don't follow the NBA and are wondering what the hell they're listening to. Normally I preface it being like, we're done with league. We're going to talk about the NBA for 5 minutes, but I forgot to do that this time. If you come
there
on
you go.
again, I totally want to talk about the NBA for 5 minutes because I think it's enjoyable. I'm also like really sad for the Lakers and Anthony Davis's injury
Yeah.
history. It's just the most brutal thing to watch. He comes back for
It's
5
awful.
games and falls again.
That honestly, every player that has gone through just injury after injury, like they do get put in a dark place. But then after seeing that injury, I was like, wow, that is tough. I still haven't seen the update personally, so I don't know if it's the
All they
season ending.
said was at least 4 weeks.
Okay, that's doable.
So, like,
Yeah.
but also Kendrick Nunn has been out for 2 weeks since the start of the season, so I don't trust the Lakers training staff. Like,
True.
what is
True.
going on over there?
Oh God, you're right.
Yeah, where is he? He just doesn't exist.
He's gone. So I do hope that he's healthy and stays healthy.
Yeah.
Like, sure, for the Lakers' hopes, because they are a good team, even though they're getting destroyed. Like, but once they get Anthony Davis, LeBron, and they actually have time to play it out and get comfortable with just the full unit healthy, they will just be a different team. They will not be a championship team, but they'll be an actual playoff team.
That's the hope. Let's go.
Yep.
Anything else you want to add before we wrap up?
Let's go, Raptors! They're back.
Hey.
We're gonna get into the playoffs. I mean, we're already in seventh position. We'll make a fuss, and I hope we're not out in the first round. I think second round.
I mean, that'll be a win.
Yeah.
That'll be a win. If they, I mean, you just talked about it. If they play the Bulls, maybe they have a chance.
Yep. Maybe.
But maybe they play Cleveland. The East is so tight. You never know what
True.
could happen. All right.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining me. Hope to have you back soon. To everybody else, thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, comment. I read all the comments, Reddit thread, YouTube. It's been great so far. So keep it up. Thank you guys very much for watching, and we'll see you next time.
See ya.